So welcome back to BD Rugby. So today we'll be looking at who I think Borthwick will select in terms of forwards. So please look out for my previous video on the backs if you want to focus mainly backs. But this video today will talk about who I think Borthwick will select in terms of forwards for that first test against Scotland on the 4th of February. Again, based on the fact that he will have influence from his current coaches and all his experience, both as a player and a coach. So I want to look at it from back row to the props. I think back row particularly because it's quite contentious. Obviously, you've got to base it on a little bit of the absentees, and there's more coming out today following the weekend. But Tom Curry, we know, will not be available. I'm not sure if that's the whole Six Nations, but definitely for the Scotland game. I think playing at 7, not even sure that's Tom Curry's preferred position, but I would look to be playing Ben Earl, the guy who for some reason wasn't fitting into Eddie Jones's setup, but did get some experience within that setup. He's obviously he's an informed player. And I do actually think England would probably benefit from someone mobile like that at 7, who's got a kind of all-round skill set to be quite effective. And yet he's not coming in as a complete newbie. He's been evolved. He's had caps. So I think really he can make that step up against Scotland and be very effective. He's good over the ball, carries well, runs good lines, and he's got a good work rate and can play to a game plan, having played all his career or most of his career at Saracens. Obviously had that 1 year at Bristol. At number 8, with no Billy Vunipola, I fully expect Dombrandt to come back in. Again, a guy who's probably made the step up to test level. I think he's been good when he's played. He's a guy that probably, different to Billy, he probably attacks and carries better slightly wider out, not really wide, but slightly wider out, where he runs very good lines. And I do think having someone like Nick Evans as part of those selection meetings, I think he will get championed, because I think Dombrandt, from an attacking perspective, is a huge weapon. You have to see the number of tries and sort of carries he makes. And I think England could build a really good team. So in keeping fit, I think he could definitely be one that we can build round, and it'd be good to get him some more experience ahead of the World Cup. Looking at 6, now 6 is a bit more contentious. I do wonder in the future if that's where I see Tom Curry playing, particularly he's built himself up. He does less of the jackling work. He's more of a workhorse. He carries, defends hard. He's almost more of a physique of a 6 now, and I think the way he's talked about and played would probably play that there. But obviously he's not available. I hear in the reports that also Courtney Laws is now not available. I did wonder if he might play there. I mean, again, we're talking about someone who was captain in England only within the last 12 months. He was the starting 6 for the Lions, so probably should play there, and he probably was starting to play some of his better rugby and playing more like a back row player. However, he's injured, he's not played a lot, so can we rely on him? I do wonder, looking at that they'll probably potentially bring in Jack Willis, so whether Earl or Willis have 6 or 7 on the back, it probably doesn't make a massive difference. Jack Willis is a player that once he became available, he was snapped up by Toulouse. Now, there was a lot of players from Worcester and Wasps who were available, but Toulouse didn't go after any of those. I think it's like if a player got selected by Real Madrid or Barcelona. There's a lot to be said about that. So I think, yes, he didn't get as many starts as perhaps he should have done with Eddie Jones, but he's a player that I've often said on here, I think gives you a different sort of USP. He's particularly good at jackling over the ball, which England really haven't had. He carries very well. And again, a guy who probably similar to both Earl and Dombrandt, who actually would really benefit from just having a bit more caps under their belt going into that World Cup. And they really could then perhaps make that step up. And then you could see Willis, Earl and Curry almost being your back row 3 that kind of fill in and maybe even potentially play, depending on if we have to adapt for the opposition. So looking at second rows, I think we'll probably all say Kit the Marrow's a shoe-in. He's probably in a World 15 or definitely in a World 23, so he should be playing. In terms of the other lot, now I think Borthwick will go with Johnny Hill. However, this is obviously Borthwick's area, isn't it? He's got a high expectation around someone taking a lead on the line out. My understanding is in the previous regimes that Johnny Hill has been doing that. Because of that expectation, I wonder if you don't meet his expectation, perhaps that you need that there's an opportunity for someone else in there. So I anticipate Johnny Hill playing against Scotland, although I do wonder if that's one of the positions that over the Six Nations may change. And it may be that one of the current locks, or even someone like Dave Ribbons, who I understand has been called up recently due to the injuries, whether someone like himself or even Laws coming back in the second row, there might be someone else who comes into that phase. So I think Johnny Hill's been good over the last 12 months, but I'm not convinced that he's a Borthwick type of player. And so that will be an interesting one to see how that develops. Now, looking at the props, I think Ellis Genge is probably a shoe-in at loosehead. He's been listed as a vice-captain. He's probably been one of the informed players in the last 12 months. He was obviously Borthwick's captain at Leicester. I think also touched on the other cut. I think both Kevin Sinfield's going to be a big fan of him. Again, with these things with Leicester, but just his mentality. And actually, I think Nick Evans will be, because he's an incredible carrying threat, and he's actually got the skill set to play a bit more of an expansive game. So I fully expect him to play there. In terms of hooker, I think given the injuries, Jamie George is again another shoe-in, and probably should be. I think he's probably got even over Luke Cowan-Dickie, I reckon he's got the skill set to be that number one. But obviously the line-out's going to be important, so he's got to get his kind of throwing in, his arrows right. And I think hopefully we can keep him fit for the tournament, because if not, we are going to start struggling, and we're going to really be drawing on people with very little experience. Now, tight head's an interesting one. I actually think that Dan Cole, I know he's come back from the wilderness as such, but I actually think he probably will start. I think if he's in the squad, then he's going to play. He's one of those sort of players. And I would actually anticipate him starting rather than maybe Sinclair starting, because I think he'd be better to play Cole early on. You know, where the scrum becomes a little bit of a lottery, get the referee on your side, you know, show that you're the team that are making the advances, and then bring Sinclair on. Also, when the games loose sort of opened up a little bit, I think Sinclair will be a bit more effective. Plus, I think having that competition will be good for Sinclair, because, you know, given that he's, again, another Lion, he's a guy with high pedigree, but I don't think he's been really cutting it for the last 12 months. And I think having some competition, like real experience competition from Dan Cole, will actually drive him on. And it may well be that Sinclair then ousts Cole, but that's a positive. And I think that may be possibly some of the move there. Now, looking at the bench and looking at the front row bench, I think you're probably looking at, as I mentioned, Sinclair's going to be back up tight head. Loose head wise, we're looking at loose head wise. We're probably looking at Vonipola if he's fit. I think that he would be the guy to come on. He you know, even in those games that we struggled with in the autumn, actually in that New Zealand game when he came on, he was brilliant. If we can get that back, again, another experienced guy, probably a good man to have around to the squad and the 23. So I definitely bring him in. I noticed from the weekend that George McGuigan is injured, so I think we're probably looking at Jack Walker being on the bench, which I think is good. I think Jack Walker, as I've touched on other videos, this is a guy who I think was previously age group captain in England, so he's got strong leadership skills. He seemed to lose his way at Bath, but obviously he's been part of a title-winning team at Harlequins. The narrative around him from Borthwick is he's a good guy, a good person to be around, and I think, you know, culture is really important, you know, particularly at international level where you're not having that ability to spend lots of time together. You've got to have the right people around. So could well be a really good addition. And I think, you know, he's a big chap in the sense of, so I think he'll be able to take the test match level intensity and sort of physicality. So yeah, I'd like to see him get some caps and experience. I think that would be really give that bit more strength in depth for England. And then looking at second row and back row. So second row, I think that they might well go with more of a hybrid. So I think Chesham might well be, again, another player will make an impact off the bench. It's that sort of very physical kind of character. Obviously, a lot of experience with Sinfield and Borthwick at Leicester. Could play back row, could play second row. So I could definitely see him, and it'd be good to give him some experience. And then I think from the back row, looking at what we've got available, they might even go with someone like Lewis Ludlam, who's not talked a lot about, but the guy's not really ever done anything wrong for England. Actually, I think he would have probably even played a bit more last Six Nations had he not got injured, because he was really good in that first game against Scotland. And actually, he is probably more competent as an 8 and a back row, across the whole back row. They could go with someone like Sam Simmonds, but I'm not convinced that outside of playing 8, he can play 6 or 7. I think he's just an 8 playing 6 or 7, whereas I think there are distinct differences. So I could definitely see Lewis Ludlam, in the absence of Tom Curry and Courtney Laws, I could see him playing as that backup player. And I definitely think, in the Australia tests in the summer, he really made an impact when he came on. So, and I think that would have not gone unnoticed from players. Plus, he was a player in the last World Cup who came out from nowhere when Borthwick was running the forward. So it's obviously a guy that he's invested something in, and they must see something from him. So I think he will be the guy going forward. So that's my England team. If I put it all together here, so from my previous video and this video, this is what I think will be the England Borthwick's 23 going forward. I might make some different changes if it was me, but this is what I think Borthwick will do going forwards. But I imagine due to availability, injury, and of course, as it develops over the Six Nations, there will be some changes. So again, thank you for watching these videos. Thank you for subscribing, thank you for your comments, and thank you for your likes. I'll try and do some more videos as topics come up, but obviously if there's any things that you want me to talk about, please pop them in the comments, because sometimes if not, it's me trying to invent stuff. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.